My kid is always going to be able to tell me, she said. Always. She looked at her, and Avery saw the hope beneath her exhaustion, like the sun peeking through clouds. Anyway, Nikki added with a laugh, fuck ducks. Avery could have pushed her then, she could have asked more questions, but she didn't. She sat on the bench holding her sister's hand, watching the ducks glide across the glassy water with their ducklings in tow, and she stayed silent, happy just to be with her. Of course. Nikki refused the hysterectomy. She wanted to be a mother more than she wanted to be free. Or, rather, motherhood was the form of freedom she chose. Not a life without pain, but a life assembled around it. Love coupled forever with fear. A paper dollhouse built around an open flame. That was why she had been taking the painkillers, to hold off one kind of pain to make way for a better one. And now, here was Avery promising Chiti a child. But was it what she wanted? This dream Nikki had lived for? Died for? Could she love a child because her sister would have loved a child? Because Chiti would? Could that be enough for her? Should it be? Shit, Charlie murmured beside her. Avery had almost forgotten he was there. I'm sorry that happened to her. And to you, I don't know what else to say. He gave her a nervous look, and she was suddenly aware of his age. He was young. Early 20s, probably, mid at most. What could he know of loss? There's nothing to say, she replied, her voice returning to its quality of crisp control. It happened, and I have to live with it. End of story. No reason why, no hidden lesson, no attitude of gratitude. She almost spat the words. She died, and I'm still alive. Life's random and unfair, and sometimes it's random and more than fair. That's it. The yellow light was cooling to a dusty blue. Avery still marveled at how long the summer evenings were in London. In New York, they seemed to be over as quickly as a pop song, relinquishing themselves to equally hot nights. But in England, the light lingered like a note held on and on. I had a brother who died too, Charlie said. Avery's eyes darted to him in surprise. You did? Yeah, of leukemia. I was still pretty young, so I didn't really understand what had happened until I was older. I just remember my mom crying all the time. That's awful. Your poor mom and you. The thing that doesn't change is that I still think of myself as one of 3, even though it's just been me and my sister since I was 7. It's like this invisible limb no one knows I have, but it's always there. It's part of me. Avery nodded vigorously. Exactly. I feel exactly the same, except I'm one of 4, or I was. All girls. I'm the eldest. Yeah, see, that's really hard. And you're older, so you feel like you've got to be strong for the others. At least that's how it was with my sister. I'm really sorry you're going through that. I don't get it, but I get it. You get it? Avery nodded. I do. Charlie glanced at her and smiled. Pretty weird, right? That we've both been through that? I knew there was something about you. Avery allowed herself the slightest smile. It had been a long time since anyone had made her feel special. She dropped the cigarette and ground it out with the heel of her ridiculous loafers. So, what about you? She asked. Do you believe everything happens for a reason? That there's a benevolent God watching over us? Charlie ran his hand over the back of his neck and offered her something between a grin and a grimace. Recovery really robs us of the ability to make small talk, right? Avery gave a low laugh. You don't have to answer. No, it's a good question. He looked up as a cluster of wood pigeons fled the tree above, leaving in unison, as birds somehow magically knew to do. I don't, he said quietly. But I wish I did. I wish I had my mother's God, actually. Not all the Jehovah's Witness stuff she practices. That's a bit much for me. But she believes in something that believes in her, or at least she believes it believes in her. And it comforts her, I can tell. I envy her that. Avery followed Charlie's eyes to the now empty tree. The leaves glowed electric green in the evening light. I wish I had your mother's God, too. Charlie nodded thoughtfully. If I did, I definitely would have spent a lot less money on cocaine, he said. Avery barked with laughter. True, and I probably wouldn't have shot heroin into my groin, she said. Charlie glanced at her in surprise. Really? I can't picture that. Or were you one of those heroin chic chicks? Avery colored ever so slightly. As far as she knew, no one had ever thought of her as chic at doing anything, heroin or otherwise. I lived in a commune for a while with a group of libertarian Marxists and anarchists, and then in a parking lot in the Tenderloin. I guess it was meant to be some kind of 24-hour protest against the system, but we mostly just shot up and gave each other head lice. Charlie laughed, and the sound was like a smooth banister she could slide down to another floor, another life. And did it work? He asked. Did you feel free of the chains of capitalism? Mostly, I just felt itchy, she said. How long did that last? The itching? That life. Until I was 23 and got clean. So you have... He was fishing for her age, but she let him have it. 10 years next month, she said. 23 plus 10. She was 33 years old, had been sober now for longer than she ever drank or used drugs. But she didn't feel sober at all. She felt lost. Wow, that is sensational, Charlie said, and the word in his mouth sounded like something smooth and delicious, like a fruit from a foreign country she had yet to try. I don't know what it is yet, said Avery, but it's definitely something. At the tube station, they exchanged numbers and an awkward, lingering hug. When she got home, she went straight to her study to search his name. She was surprised to find there were dozens of articles about his work and videos of his readings. She had taken him for an amateur, but he was just that rarest of things, humble. Checking over her shoulder to make sure Chiti wasn't nearby, she pressed play on the first video that came up. It felt illicit, as though she was watching porn, not a poetry reading. He was standing in front of a packed crowd at one of the East London bars Avery never went to, the audience's faces upturned to him. They were all slim and young and able to sit cross-legged on the floor without issue. She could see one woman wearing a vintage military beret. Charlie looked relaxed in a red hoodie and jeans standing above the others, everyone's eyes on him. Then he began to speak. Without ceremony, without self-consciousness, reciting from memory with a half-smile on his face that seemed to suggest that, yes, he was there, earnestly taking part in this ancient social tradition of oral poetry, but he was also lightly laughing at himself for being there, laughing at all of them, at the whole enterprise. As he spoke, he flitted seamlessly between gravity and levity, the cosmic and the comic, never landing in one place too long. By the time the poem ended, Avery didn't feel that she wanted him, exactly. She wanted to be him. She wanted to make a bed in the chamber of his chest and live there. She wanted to speak and have his words come out of her mouth. She wanted to be a man on stage with a woman in a beret staring at her like she had just invented language. She wanted to see the world as he did and make it into an offering. The next day, Charlie texted her that he was going to a meeting at 6 that evening, and Avery answered immediately that she would meet him there. It was the earliest she had left work in months. She often stayed in the office until after 8 p.m., then took more work home with her to look at after dinner. Chiti had long ago accepted this and sometimes even scheduled clients that late herself, ostensibly ones who, like Avery, struggled with work boundaries. But they spent enough time together, Avery told herself. They took weekend walking tours in the Lake District and went to dinner regularly at the Italian place at the top of the high street where the pasta came baked in tinfoil, and the host always brought them a complimentary slab of tiramisu. But Avery had not left work early to spend time with Chiti in a long time, and it was this, more than anything else, that nagged her as she walked to the church. Then she entered the meeting and saw Charlie sitting coolly in the last row, one arm slung over the back of a chair he was saving for her, and she stopped thinking about anything at all. "Hey, American," he said. "Hey, poet." He offered her the copy of the 12 and 12 the group was reading from that week. They shared the book, heads bowed close together, following along as one by one each person read a passage. A had often left Avery feeling like she was in school again. The reading aloud, the big book studies, the step work with a sponsor that felt so similar to homework. She loved the way meetings always started and ended on time, each beginning with the familiar preamble and ending with the same prayer recited as a group. After years of chaos and turbulence, it felt safe, structured, which was, she supposed, the point. But now, sitting next to Charlie, she really did feel like a schoolgirl again, the hot flush of a crush creeping into her cheeks as she inhaled the scent of smoke and a musk that was simply male wafting off his skin. At closing, when they formed a circle, and she slipped her hand into his cool, dry palm, Avery felt something she had not felt in a long time, a frisson of desire. Later that week, she met Charlie at another meeting. Lucky was arriving from Paris that evening, and she knew she should go straight home after work to meet her, but it felt so good, for once, to not do what she was supposed to do. And, if she was honest, she wanted an excuse to be out of the house. Chidi had promptly started looking at sperm donor websites online after their conversation on Nikki's anniversary, happily peppering Avery with life-altering questions with the blithe breeziness of someone asking what she wanted for dinner. Did she have a preference on the donor's race? Height? Did she want to know where they went to college? While Avery felt like the air was slowly being siphoned out of the room. She met him in the basement of a church in Belsize Park at a meditation meeting where they discussed the 11th step. Avery opened her eyes during the meditation to find him watching her with his calm, still gaze. At first, she'd attempted to make light of it and pulled a silly face to make him laugh, but he had continued regarding her with serene composure. Eventually, she stilled too, and they sat like that, each looking into the other's eyes in a silence that seemed to reach for eternity. Only when the timer went off and the room sprang back to life with the usual sighs and shuffles did their eyes break away from each other. As the secretary read from the script, Avery glanced down into her lap, overcome suddenly by the desire to shake herself out like a wet dog or hoot with laughter or stretch her mouth into a scream. Something to release the intensity of the past handful of minutes. Her entire body was buzzing with a new electricity. Chemistry, she thought with wonder, impossible to force or fake, inexplicable and undeniable. Who knew why she had it with Charlie? She only knew that she did. He was walking her back toward Hampstead after the meeting when she turned to him. "I watched some of your readings online," she said. Charlie raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You looked me up?" "Just doing my due diligence. I am a lawyer, after all." "What did you think?" She smiled. "To borrow a word from you, sensational." Charlie beamed, making no effort to hide his delight. "Were they what you expected? My poems?" "I guess I thought maybe they'd be more political. They're sort of party poems." He laughed. "No, I mean that in a good way," continued Avery. "Like, they could be read in the middle of a party and not interrupt the flow of festivities. Even when they're sad, they still feel like a celebration." Charlie plucked a leaf from a bush and began breaking it into green confetti. "It's interesting that you say that. I think there's an expectation that someone like me has to stand for something political, but I'm philosophical. I'm really into this idea that my ethical code doesn't have to come from any doctrine. There is no intrinsic right or wrong, only what's right or wrong for me. So essentially moral nihilism crossed with psychological egoism?" "Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it is," Charlie said, giving her an impressed look. "I studied philosophy at undergrad, a fact that usually renders me insufferable to 99% of people." "I think you are the opposite of insufferable," said Charlie. "I suffer you gladly." Avery blushed, then blushed some more when she realized she was blushing. She cleared her throat. "So you act in your own self-interest at all times?" she asked. "Pretty much." "Even at the expense of others?" "Sometimes. But if everyone acted that way and my interests and yours were in opposition, how would there be order? If there was no agreed-upon value system or moral code?" Charlie brushed the remains of the leaf from his hands. "Look, man, all I know is that I was raised in a strictly religious household that told me most of what I wanted made me morally wrong. I felt so bad so much of my life. I thought that was just the way it had to be. Then I started pushing back hard in the other direction, and I realized it wasn't. Total moral independence, that's what I believe in. Answering to myself and no one else." Avery smiled. He sounded like her 10 years ago. "And how do you feel?" "Free. I feel free." Charlie ran ahead of her and leapt up to clasp a bar of scaffolding. He hoisted himself higher in a quick succession of pull-ups, his t-shirt riding up to reveal his narrow hips. He was lithe and muscular as a fish. Avery came to stand beneath him, unable to hide her admiration. She looked up at his face, which was creased with effort. "Oh, you're so big and strong," she teased. He dropped lightly onto his feet in front of her and stood with his face inches from hers. "What did you say?" he asked. His face was cracked open with a grin, but his eyes did not leave hers. "You're so big," she said. He pulled her into him. And strong," she said. Then he kissed her, and Avery finally understood the true meaning of the phrase, blew my mind. His lips met hers, and it was like the hushed pop of a fuse blowing out. Everything inside her was cast into welcome darkness. Her mind was beautifully, blissfully blank. What a relief not to have to think anymore, not to have to pretend to be whole anymore. They kissed for an hour, his hands grabbing and kneading her body with such force, it felt like he could pull her into a new shape, a new person altogether. When she eventually broke away from him to meet Lucky, she already knew that she was too late. Avery stood now outside the address Charlie had given her and exhaled slowly. Was she really going to do this? A kiss was a transgression, but this would be a betrayal. Was it worse that he was a man? Chiti had only ever been with women, had always known that was right for her. Avery had been with men as a teenager, but not since. Boys was probably more accurate. She always said that she had only ever loved Chiti, but that wasn't entirely true. First, there had been Freya, though equating what she had with Chiti to that relationship was like comparing a fireplace to a forest fire. One was comfort, the other carnage. Avery met Freya in a class called Hope, Human Odyssey to Political Existentialism, during her final year at Columbia, where Freya was also a philosophy major. She was originally from Sweden, and she looked it. Her eyes were like sea glass with bright white eyelashes and eyebrows, and her skin turned the color of wet sand in the sun. Fiercely intelligent and arrogantly determined to live according to her own principles, she believed that personal satisfaction was the noblest activity, and the pursuit of independence was the moral purpose of life. Naturally, she read a lot of Ayn Rand. She was, Avery thought now with a start, not unlike Charlie. It was Freya who had introduced Avery to heroin. Horse, she called it with cool insouciance, insisting it wasn't truly addictive unless injected. Given her commitment to radical self-determination, it wasn't all that surprising that Freya left before graduating to join an anarchic, non-hierarchical, consensus-driven community in Northern California. Though, with her ethos of independence above all, Avery imagined she might struggle with the consensus part. The group lived on the empty ranch outside of San Francisco, owned by one of the founding members' grandparents. A trust fund kid not quite anarchic enough to believe in abolishing inheritance, who kept Freya hooked to a steady supply of downers. Drug dependency, it turned out, was an effective suppressor of independence. Salt and pepper, everyone called them, for the way Freya's white blonde hair looked next to Avery's black bob, but also because they were inseparable. They belonged together. Freya was the first person Avery truly loved outside of her family, the first woman she'd ever slept with, the first person to give her an orgasm. They were in the tiny furnished bedroom Freya rented near campus from an elderly couple she'd met through the Swedish church's housing board. The room had been their daughter's. Since either married or dead, Avery had never confirmed which, and was covered in crochet, china dolls, and Virgin Mary memorabilia. The first time Freya had disappeared beneath the bedcovers to kiss Avery's sex, Avery had looked up to see a portrait of Mary smiling down at her. Time melted and slowed. Little waves of pleasure lapped and pooled in her like warm rock pools. It felt so good, so right. Freya's mouth soft and insistent as the sea's waves, a sensation inside her like light on water, not at all like with the boys before. Above her, the Virgin Mary smiled down, and staring up into her benevolent gray eyes, Avery had orgasmed powerfully for the first time. She'd maintained a secret soft spot for the Mother of God ever since. Avery liked the effects of heroin, but it was Freya she really got high on. After Freya left for California, Avery went through one of the worst withdrawals of her life. She missed everything about her, the silky blonde hairs on her shins, her salty sweet taste, her loud, coarse laugh, her way of adding a questioning no to statements, as if both inviting and daring Avery to contradict her. Too much sunshine is bad for critical thinking, no? Let's make love in the library, then get ice cream, no? Avery waited until after she graduated and her sisters had all left home, aching with longing all the while, then moved west to follow her. They'd been living on the ranch together for a few months, aimless and increasingly strung out, when one of the other commune members climbed through their bedroom window and raped Freya while Avery slept next to her in drug-stupefied unconsciousness. The next day, when Freya told the group, the mostly male members informed her that rape was a choice. She had the agency to view the experience as consensual if only she would exercise it. The two of them fled to San Francisco, slept on the streets or in motels when Freya's parents sent money, and stole everything else they needed. They were both too thin, afflicted by head lice, thrush, dry skin, and intermittent withdrawals. But they were still salt and pepper, Avery believed, still made for each other. Then, Freya overdosed. She survived, but her parents, tall and blonde, arrived at the San Francisco General Hospital looking like Norse gods, picked her up, and took her back to Sweden without saying a word to Avery. It was Nikki she called from the hospital payphone, Nikki who used up all her air miles to book her a flight home, though Avery wouldn't show up to thank her in person for another month. Her pride would not allow her to be seen in that state by any of her sisters. So she went to the free detox straight from the airport, back when it was still possible to show up unannounced and stay for 28 days. She never heard from Freya again, but with time, she stopped trying to reach her and was relieved. That love had been a type of madness, and just like the second step in AA says, she needed to be restored to sanity. But now, standing in front of Charlie's home, that old insanity was back. What was it in her that loved a wildfire? It was pointless to pretend to herself that she wasn't going in after coming all this way. The torturing herself before, that was part of the process. She couldn't even self-sabotage in a spontaneous way. Hedonism, she was discovering, didn't really work when you were sober, grieving, and 33. The address he had given her was for a modest red-brick terraced house in the heart of Willesden Green. He probably had roommates, she thought grimly, the kind of bathroom with too many people's shampoos cluttering the edge of the bath. Avery walked up the short, narrow path to the front door, which was painted a jaunty green, and raised the knocker. Her hand was shaking. She stared at it. She realized, trembling all over. She could stop this right now, she reminded herself. She could turn around and go home. But she knew she wouldn't. She felt too alive. Charlie opened the door in a pair of black track pants and no shirt. The muscles in his shoulders and arms rippled as he opened the door. Avery almost laughed. He was dressed the part, at least. She walked through the doorway and kissed him. His chest under her hands felt like something pulled taut and ready, not soft with the give of flesh she was used to. She kissed his chest and ran her tongue over his stomach, dropping to her knees right there in the hallway. It was like licking marble. Sensational. "Not here," he said, laughing as he pulled her up. Now she had decided to do this. She was feeling high on her own recklessness. It would almost be a relief to get caught. Only something outside of herself could stop her now. But the house was quiet. Avery followed him up the narrow staircase, glancing into the small living room as she went. She saw a faded floral sofa, a mantelpiece filled with pictures of smiling faces. Charlie as a little boy in glasses and a tie, a teenage girl in a graduation robe, a black and white photo of a beautiful woman, probably his mother, in a long white wedding dress next to a stiff-backed man in a three-piece suit. In his bedroom, books were everywhere, piled on the small dresser and stacked against the walls. The gray sheets on his low twin bed were meticulously folded and pulled stiff like in a hotel. "You have a single bed," she said. He smiled. "It's my parents' place." Avery dropped her bag to the floor, slipped off her shoes. "Of course it is." "Hey, London rents ain't cheap, man." "I'm not going to have to meet your mother, am I?" "She's out with her church group and Dad's at work," he said, "so you'll just have to make do with me." "You never mentioned your dad before," said Avery. "Not much to say. He's just a solid, nice man." "Like you?" It could have been a statement, but it was a question. Charlie gave a slow, sly smile. "I don't think you came here to talk about my family," he said. He deftly unwound Avery from her wrap dress until she was standing in just her black cotton thong. His eyes widened as he took her in. She had a slim snake coiled around one arm, its daggered tongue licking her elbow, a small starling nestled under each collarbone. Nice ink, he said. Avery shrugged. Past life. How many do you have? She gave him a mischievous look. You'll have to find them. He pressed her onto the twin mattress and crept his fingers over her body in a tender excavation, checking the soles of her feet, her inner thighs under each breast. He found the little boat riding the waves of her ribcage, the face drawn in one line like a Matisse sketch on her inner arm, the anarchy symbol on her shoulder blade she'd let Freya give her with a stick and poke needle while high. Across her heart she had 3 small letters, B and L. He traced them with his finger. My sisters, she said. He nodded wordlessly. There's just one more, she said. He sat back on his heels. I give up, he said. She pulled down her bottom lip to reveal a 4-leaf clover inked into the pink flesh of her inner mouth. You're full of surprises, he said. Like an Easter egg? He climbed onto the bed, laying the length of his body on top of her. Not any Easter egg I ever had. Avery closed her eyes as Charlie slipped his hand into her underwear. 8 years with Sheety, and they still had sex, but she had to choose to get turned on. It wasn't instinctive anymore, the way it had been at the beginning, a carnal impulse impossible to ignore or deny. These days, an internal alarm would go off in one of them that it had been too long, and they would decide to have sex. It was still enjoyable, but it felt like maintenance as opposed to lust. This was different. Her body acted without thought, without instruction. Wow, he said. He pulled his hand from between her legs, and his fingers were slick with her wetness. Sorry, she whispered, though she wasn't sure why. It felt excessive, somehow, evidence of something too much in her. No, I love it, he murmured. And then he was on his knees, pulling down her underwear, and his mouth was on her, his hot breath, his tongue. She pulled him back up. Not that. She reached between his legs. This. He freed himself from his sweatpants in one movement, and she realized he was not wearing any underwear. He stroked himself with one hand and sank a finger back into her with the other. You sure? He asked, his hands moving in tandem, one on him, one in her. Avery nodded, closing her eyes. He braced himself over her, then pushed the length of himself inside of her in one long thrust. She gasped. How long had it been since she'd felt this? 10 years? More? She had never slept with a man sober. Charlie began to move in and out slowly, and she heard herself making noises that weren't familiar at all, little animal moans and whines. He seemed to be touching the deepest part of her. As she whimpered, he cupped her head in his hands and looked at her. His face above her was utterly defenseless. I'm not hurting you, he asked. She shook her head. No. You don't want me to stop? No. She squeezed her eyes shut again and pushed her mouth up onto his. She breathed his breath. He tasted vaguely sweet, like apple juice. Then he was moving inside of her again, deep, rhythmic strokes through the center of her. She was sweating, and so was he, their chests slipping against each other. He pushed her hair from her damp temples and kissed her there. She burrowed her face into the heat of his neck. She didn't think about anything except the feel of him. It was the not thinking she loved most, the not thinking that she never wanted to end. I'm close, he said eventually. Wait for me. She grabbed handfuls of his buttocks and pulled him into her, thrusting him deeper and deeper in a succession of sharp, quick pumps. Then she squeezed a hand between her pelvis and his so she could touch herself as he moved inside of her. With a great throbbing wave, she came. She ached and ached with it. As the wave subsided, she felt the involuntary release and heard a soft sigh as he emptied himself inside of her. Avery's eyes rolled back in her head. There it was, that familiar sensation, unbidden yet unforgotten, of pleasure locked in consort with pain, just like plunging down the piston of a syringe. Afterward, they lay side by side, their backs against the wall, their legs hanging over the narrow bed. He leaned over to scoop up his crumpled sweatpants and drape them over his crotch with a self-conscious gesture that surprised her. She looked down to see his semen leaking out of her. It formed a wet, dark patch on the pale gray duvet between her legs. Shit, she said. Sorry. Here. He grabbed the leg of his sweatpants and held it to her as though stemming the flow of blood from a wound. Thanks, she said, wiping herself roughly with the fabric. Are you... On some kind of birth control? She glanced at him. Why is it that men only ever ask that after they've come inside you? Charlie ducked his head with embarrassment. Don't worry, she said. I'll take care of it. I'm sorry I didn't ask, he said. Let me know if I can pay for it. No, absolutely not, Avery said. She stood up and pulled on her underwear, then began wrapping herself back up in her dress. She was struggling to find the little hole the sash went through to close the thing. I'm the one who should be apologizing, she said in a rush. You're a newcomer, and I'm... Charlie stood up and pulled on his sweatpants, clearly unperturbed that they had just been used to soak up his cum. He stepped toward her and took the sash from her hand, deftly weaving it through the slit in the fabric at her waist, then tying it in a bow with the other end. Look, I have 3 months, but I'm not 3 months old. I'm 27, man. Avery looked up at his face. Nikki's age. He was Nikki's age. 27 is young, she said softly. It doesn't feel it. It's your first year in the program. You'll see. It's a vulnerable time. I know, but I've already changed a lot. Charlie went over to a pair of jeans slung over his desk chair and pulled a pack of cigarettes and his silver Zippo from the back pocket. He opened his window and motioned for her to join him. When did you start smoking? She asked, accepting the cigarette he offered her. When I was 12. I smoked my first blunt and my first cigarette in the same day with my older cousin. I just wanted to be like him. Where's your cousin now? He works in the city, got a wife who's a model, and twins on the way. Turns out I was the bad influence. What about you? 14, I think. I was in Central Park walking home from school and bummed it off a Japanese businessman. I smoked it too quickly and promptly threw up in a bush. I promised myself never again. Yeah, I'm familiar with that tune. Never again, never again. Avery smiled sadly. She was telling herself that right now. You know a joke my sponsor told me? Charlie asked. An alcoholic will steal your wallet, but an addict will steal it and help you look for it. That's how I know I'm definitely an addict as well, because I swear to God, I've fucking done that. I've lied so much I didn't even know I was lying anymore. Honesty? What did Avery know about honesty? She leaned her head against the window frame. A warm breeze paraded in. Now would probably not be a great time to tell you I'm married, she said. I know, he said. She looked over at him in surprise. To a woman, she added. I know, he said. How? I looked you up too. You had a wedding registry. Your wife has a really beautiful name. I can't remember it now. Chitrita, said Avery softly. I could be divorced. Charlie nodded. You could, but I'm not. Okay. And it doesn't matter to you either way? Monogamy, fidelity, heterosexuality. These aren't words I put a lot of store in. Right, nodded Avery, because you're an amoral egoist. Exactly. Well, that's convenient for you, but sadly, those words do mean something to me. Charlie shifted so he was facing her in the window. The truth is, I'm not trying to get into anything heavy right now. You seem like a smart, cool person who's going through some shit. If you want to use me to feel better in the moment, I've got no complaints. I've been with men. I've been with women. Married, not married. I'm just not going to feel bad about something because someone else told me I should. I decide what feels good for me. Because you're free, she said. Exactly. Well, thank you for letting me use you. Charlie grinned. Anytime. You're cool, you know? You're real. You're real, too. She smiled self-consciously. Whatever that means. He glanced around his bedroom. Now, all I need is my own flat and a bigger bed. Avery laughed and looked out the window at the parched lawn of the garden below. A dilapidated football net stood at one end, a beautiful bush of frothy-headed hydrangea at the other. Somewhere through an open window, she could hear an audience laughing on TV. You know what I think really makes me an addict? She asked. It's not how many drugs I took or how much I drank. It's not even the lying. What? She inhaled so deeply that her lungs burned. I find what gives me pleasure, and I do it until it gives me pain, she said. Every time. Charlie looked at her with his funny half-smile. Yeah, but how else would you know when to stop?